Yeah, so I love it when a plan comes together. Like here, we're sitting here today with our next guest, Theresa Bruno. Yes, she was a is celebrity jewelry designer, author. She's host of the Soul Talks podcast. Get your soul on, guys. It's very inspiring. And now she's the voice behind a very powerful new book called He's Not Coming Back. There's a lot of weight even just in that title. It came out back in April. And for 2 decades, Theresa, she poured her energy into her business that was building a thriving marketing company and later creating her own jewelry brand, Jordan Alexander, which is a massive feat in itself, obviously. But everything changed when she lost her dear husband, James, to suicide about 5 years ago. And that loss reshaped her, obviously, at her core. It shifted her definition of success. And, we're going to talk about survival, resilience, and one of my favorite words in the English language, connection. And through her podcast, Soul Talk, she built a real space to explore those hard conversations that we don't always know how to have around, grief, shame, heartbreak, and ultimately finding a way forward, which is the real conversation here. So what started as a service to others has become her own lifeline, and I can't wait to dive deep. You know this is my bag, Jimmy Mack. So now, please make welcome to the show my new friend and yours, Theresa Bruno. Good morning. How are you?
Hi, I love that introduction. Thank you so much. That was amazing and beautiful and celebratory. And I'm great this morning. I'm great. Delighted to be here.
Well, good. Guess what? That intro is about you. We had nothing to do with it. That is your life, my friend. So,
well, it was extremely well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just kind of dig right in here. I just want to kind of touch on this is the fact that, we live in an era where often people are kind of told, feel better. Get over it. We got things to do. Everybody's happy. Everybody's free. Go be productive and keep the economy going. Do what you have to do. Move on to the next thing. And, we talk about mindfulness in the workplace, but we don't really talk about the idea of not making mindfulness one more task or one more chore. We don't talk about the idea that sometimes to just be is enough. And so much of what you're talking about is like, you know what? Just giving yourself permission to shut it down. And I don't know if that lands with you, if I'm making myself clear, but I just wanted to kind of unpack the idea of sometimes doing nothing and letting yourself be in what you are is the way back to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to kind of come at it. You hit on a couple of things there. One of the things is, and it's been part of sort of my lifeline in the last 5 years. I didn't come to it immediately, of course, because grief, it's a wicked, jagged journey. And, it just takes you down all kinds of rabbit holes before you start hanging on to lifelines. But I think it is so important in our lives to figure out where to be present with ourselves. And like you said, we live in the Instagram beautiful world, where, we're just always supposed to be great and succeeding and the kids are perfect and we're not lonely and we're not depressed. And that's just a ball of bunk. I think sometimes to figure out how we feel, we have to get still and quiet. And then I'll give you just, one of my little hacks, and it's not mine. It's come through a whole lot of messaging of late, but I found it through a wonderful woman named Marissa Peer. And that's when you choose to really start looking internally. You give yourself space, like you said, just to be still and be quiet, and to take 3 really powerful words and kind of tattoo them, if you will, on your soul. And those are, I am enough. Just as you are, just in that moment, I am enough. And if you begin to metabolize that and let it really sink in, it starts to inform and shift how you live your life.
Wow. Those, it's true. I think it kind of actually, Jim, it goes back to talking about that scene when she's stuck in a cave and he has to say, slow down your breathing. And that moment, I was so reminded of my own power when I'm claustrophobic, whether that be from an actual physical standpoint or whether you're drowning literally or figuratively, either way. Yeah. It's that slow down your breath, take a pause, say, I am enough, I am safe, I am okay. Like when I start to freak out and go down, have an anxiety attack, I have to say, you are fine. And it helps. It sounds silly, but it can bring you out of something, right? I mean, do you have to do, Teresa,
Totally.
with all you've been, do you have to on a daily basis kind of hug yourself and say, you got this?
Oh, are you kidding? It takes me a full hour in the morning to pour goodness into myself, to set intentions. I mean, these days that's a very intentional practice. But it was really part of my path out, exactly what you're talking about, and it was a learning for me because I had lived so fast. Everything was about success and doing more, and yet never feeling like the success was enough. And then I had to shutter the business due to fraud, and it was such a passion business and such a public business, the jewelry business. And, I was filled with so much shame because of it as a woman. I felt like I'd failed. And I failed because I wasn't present enough. I was running two big businesses and a family, and, I didn't see the fraud that was happening underneath my nose. So I had all that shame. And then my best friend, my peas and carrots, Sweet James, took his life. And it, I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I feel like everybody in this world is carrying some pain, suffering from something, surviving something. But when James took his life, it took mine too, in a way, because it was everything I'd built my life on. And it was, I loved him so much, and it was such a betrayal of all we'd built and the two children we had and, just the whole life. But one of the ways out for me that started really slowly, and I think your trucker audience could probably relate to this, is I just started writing on sticky notes because I couldn't kind of pull myself out of it, but I knew how I wanted to feel. I knew that I used to be a really courageous woman and I used to be really, really confident, but that was like puddles on the floor at that point. And so I would just write these sticky notes and put them like where I put on my makeup or on the gear shift of my car, in my wallet. And I would say, I want to feel courageous today. I want to feel confident today. And then I began studying people who wrote about, the power of our minds. And it's exactly what you just said. What we think, like if you're in a panic situation, if you keep thinking about the panic and that you can't breathe and you're scared to death or you're claustrophobic, that's how you're going to feel. But if you start doing exactly as you said, and you start deep breathing and you say, I've got this, and it's a small dark space and I'm good in it, there's enough space for me, your body adjusts. Our bodies don't know anything other than what our minds tell it. And so our minds truly create the life we live. And that became one of the most powerful things I've learned in this grief journey, is that what I'm saying to myself about myself, what I'm saying to myself about how I want to live, is exactly what my life is going to look like.
I want to share a story. Lindsay knows this story, and it's why going through a lot of what you have to say and a lot of stuff that you guys have put down in podcast form and in speaking, a lot of the language you talk about. My mom and dad, who are both still alive and well in their 80s, are very devout in their faith. And my mom, over the course of a 3-month period, her father died on the table from a heart attack after he'd gotten through the chemo that was going to allow him to live. Her best friend died of leukemia on the third and final chemo process that would have allowed her to live. And her sister, her younger sister, died from lung cancer. And they did it all in a 3-month period. And it was Lent. And we were sitting around, and people asked my mother what she was giving up for Lent, and I remember this. And I've read so many things, so many spiritual books, so many philosophy books, all that stuff. And this is where what you're talking about really hit me hard. It's the best. It's the most wise thing I ever heard. My mom turned and she said, "I gave up my mom. I gave up my dad. I gave up my best friend and my maid of honor, and I gave up my sister, who I was with the longest with. I think I've given up enough. I'm covered on Lent." And I remember, and there was, and then exactly, and all these people, Lindsay, and all these people, Theresa, they all just kind of nodded. There wasn't a sense of, oh, this was awkward. She didn't say it in a nasty way. She wasn't angry. But it was this moment when she said, you know what? The whole idea of Lent is to give up something to put ourselves in and remind ourselves that grief does come and sadness does come. And in some ways, in going through the material that you have, I was reminded that we should be perpetually aware of this place, not to dwell there, but to remember that it's always with us, as Lindsay referenced in the last half hour. And it's almost like training ourselves to have a muscle so that we can allow ourselves permission to descend into that place so that we can come out maybe more whole, or at least with more wisdom inside. I don't know if that touches
Hmm.
anything or speaks to you. I just wanted to
Oh,
share that.
yeah, and I love your mom already, by the way. I think that's a really tough story and just such a wise approach. It's like I said, once I started doing the podcast and just opening up space for everybody to just talk about what they're going through, it becomes so palpable, and I'm sure you hear this on your show, how everybody is suffering. Everybody's suffering from something. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, life is hard. We all get thrown a lot of curveballs. And grief is a jagged journey. You always carry some part of it, even though you learn to live alongside of it. I couldn't do this early on in my journey, so please don't think I'm making light of the grief. I'm not. But I do think that it's so important to figure out as soon as you're able to celebrate the little stuff. If you made your own coffee this morning, if you were able to do that, that's a celebration. If you can have gratitude for anything at all in life instead of just it all looking dark and sorrowful, that's something to celebrate. I was with a bunch of girls over the weekend, and we were kind of doing, some spiritual exercises, like you talk about a little bit, like what to let go of. And I was like, I'm sitting here at the 5 year and 5 month mark, and you know what I want to let go of? I want to let go of walking in sorrow. I want to walk over that demarcation line and say, it's time to really feel joy again. It's time to really celebrate. I've done this. There is goodness in life. So I'm not trying to make light of grief in any way. It has been the most gut-wrenching journey I've ever walked. But I do think everybody in life today needs to be reminded to celebrate the small stuff.
I couldn't agree more, Theresa. And then the other side of that, though, I agree 100%. And it's so hard when you're in the midst of the thing, when you're in the fog, to figure out how to open your eyes just even enough to see through the fog. And
Yeah.
I said, and I said to a good friend very recently, just this week actually, I said she just lost her. It's her ex-husband, but he was a very dear friend and the father of her child. They're still very close, and they still co-parent. And he died very unexpectedly. And she texted me to say that she and her daughter were on this trip with a couple of her friends. They're doing this like kind of 10-day pilgrimage out west and going all over. And I said something to the effect of what a cool experience you're getting to have, and that he gave you this sort of new lease on life. Now, and then I walked away from that text, and she sent kind of a short text back, and I about 10 minutes later thought, that was some toxic positivity on my part, and it's not at all what I meant. Certainly I didn't mean what a gift that he died and now you get to go on a trip. That's obviously not what I meant, but I said that. I said, oh my God, I just heard it out loud. And she responded, she goes, I'm going to be really honest, it didn't land well with me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I get it. But I guess my question through sharing that anecdote for you is when is it too soon to look for silver linings from you, from the person in the grief? Is the day after too soon to look for a silver lining, or are you even aware of that when you're going through it?
You know what? Thank you for sharing that. And I certainly didn't mean to invoke any toxic positivity here either.
No,
You
did
didn't.
not.
You did not.
not.
You
I
didn't.
did.
I think 5 years is enough. I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
Theresa, I'm with you on this one. I think
I always try. My story's a hard one. It's a hard one for people to listen to. It's a hard one to tell. And I always want the upswing of there is hope. Just look at me. I'm still standing. So for everybody who is going through things, I try to give hope, and that there is. Your story's not done. Your story is not done when you're going through all of it, but it's hard to hang on to that. When is it too early to see the upside? It's probably not an answer anybody wants to hear. I don't think I could hear it for about a year and a half. I sat in a pretty tough place for about a year and a half. And that's not to say that I had so much gratitude that I had two boys and they propelled me into life. I had so much gratitude. Almost immediately, even though I was mad at James for taking his life, and I was mad at God, I was just a mess. I had gratitude for his life because he was just truly the kindest person I've ever known. But for others to kind of try to inject something that feels just a little too sweet, a little too, convenient, it just made me mad for a really long time, I have to say.
Yeah. 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 I'm glad I learned, that lesson because I learned it in that moment. I saw it. I saw how I had very unintentionally hurt somebody very close to me, and it was our way. I think it just goes back to that there's no right thing to say in something like this. And I want to say to you, I listened to several of your podcasts, and I personally really like the fact that you're just upfront of it in the get-go. You're like, hi, I lost my husband to suicide. You're like, boom, let's get that off the table so that we can now dive in to what comes next after that, because that outside of losing a child, I'd say that's probably, those are the worst things I could conjure up. And I think by throwing it out there, not casually, but just very matter of factly, so no one has to beat around the bush, because we don't know what to say. And it's like, this happened.
I know.
This blows. Now what do we do? A little bit
Exactly.
of that. And I think that's very comforting and conversational how you do that.
Well, thank you. I want to go back to your story of your friend and just say, what that story says to me is the health of the friendship, that she could come back to you and say, hey, that didn't really land well. The fact that you have a friendship where you're communicating about a tough topic. I think one of the most important things in the world for us today is community, because community holds us up. Community keeps us going. And the fact that you have that friend and the two of you are honest, that's beautiful.
Good. Well, I hope she thinks that, and I hope she's. I
She
hope
was
I
honest,
conveyed that.
you know?
Yeah.
She was honest back with you, which opens it up for you to say, "Oh man, I goofed. I'm sorry. I didn't feel it in the moment." I love that. Not very many friends talk to each other like that.
Let me tell you something that just hit me. Both brought something up here too. Is the fact that Lindsay complimented you, as I do too, on the idea of this is what happened. This is who I am. And earlier on, Lindsay, in the interview, she said, she got frauded. Was a victim of fraud.
Yeah.
Just came out right and said it. What is interesting here, look, I don't think that shame is unhealthy. I think that we do things that are wrong and that we need to feel some shame so we can correct stuff. But I think that there are places where people feel shame where they shouldn't feel shame. And the two things that you just talked about, somebody else doing you dirty and then getting your heart broken by losing your best friend, under the conditions that you lost them, you have nothing to be ashamed of. And I think the idea of coming out and saying it immediately is that part of, I think, and like I said, there's been a lot of stuff that you kind of talked about in regards to this, is that we've got to be able to distinguish healthy shame from unhealthy shame, because that's really toxic too. That not being upfront and honest about the things that happen keep us further in grief, because we feel like no one will listen, because if I tell them this, they will think less of me. They will reject me from the tribe, from the community that you have talked about how much you cherish. And that's the real great value lesson as well. We need to be honest about things we have no reason to be ashamed of. Correct?
100%. And thank you for that. That's a boost. I talk about shame because I feel like so many of us carry it. And the thing that gets us out of our shame is what you just mentioned. It's sharing it. Every time we share our pain or our shame, that means the people around us are kind of carrying it a little bit for us, so it lessens its power. But if you stay in the house, shrouded in the shame, beating yourself up, you just become, you're in this vortex of self-judgment and loneliness and depression. So I always say to everybody, whatever they're experiencing, share. Find somebody you trust and share it, even if you don't want to, because that does help you walk out of that place of carrying your own shame. But thank you for saying that. It's so important.
Well, and I heard you say, I think in one of the podcasts, just that sharing your pain was essential to healing. And I've got a dear friend who has a book called Share Your Stuff. I have a podcast called We Should Write. It's about the healing power of writing, but it's like, let me say hi, Maya, which I would love to have you on, by the way, sometime. Side note.
Thank you. I'd love to.
Okay. We ask people on the air so that if they say that they can't say no,
we can shame them.
We can shame you if you say no. Exactly.
And then I'd love to have you on mine. How about that? And I totally believe in the power of writing. I write every day.
Oh, good. Well, perfect. Done. But it's the piece here. I want to mention quick. not quick. I want to talk about the parenting through grief. I can't even begin to get my head around that. So I want to first ask, how are your two sons doing?
Thank you for asking. They're both really well, 5 years in. One of them had a much rougher time than the other. My younger son, Andrew, was so close to his daddy. He was just coming out of undergrad. He and his dad, talked and text every day, and he was in college at Alabama, just, an hour away. So James would run down there for lunch all the time. And Andrew, Andrew really had his legs cut off. It's a hard walk out. But listen to this. This week, he's starting his PhD program at Rutgers. It took a while, but he is, he still hurts like heck all the time. But I think he's walking into something he loves. He's doing something he's proud of. He's managing the days he is depressed or feels anxiety. He's doing great. Jordan, my older one, is doing terrific. He got married this year to a girl he met in high school, and they're precious. So they're both really good. I think what I would say about that is the most important thing to me, and I felt like James would have wanted me to do this, was to help the boys see, and this is hard, that we were still a family. That just because Daddy wasn't there, it didn't mean the family went away. And it's just real easy when a family loses its primary, guide and member to feel like, well, we're not even a family anymore. And so that was something we shared together a lot, talked about a lot. How do we build us forward, and all the values that we're built on as a family. And yeah, it was horrible, but we're all good. I can say we're good.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking about that.
Yeah.
Can we all just have an agreement that while days have passed, often the good old days weren't so good. It's just the people protected us from knowing how bad they were. That there are a couple of time periods where maybe they give us a little bit of wisdom. I keep thinking about the Victorian era, where you basically shut the house down and you wore black and you walked around and you didn't talk to people. And
now that does sound like the good old days, actually.
I mean, my favorite line of all time comes from a play by Chekhov. A woman comes in and she's wearing a black dress, and one of the characters asks her point blank, "Why do you always wear black?" And the response is, "I'm in mourning for my life." And I just
same girl.
I think I could go there. I think I could own that one.
But the remarkable story of author Conan Doyle lost his first wife, and there was a woman that he had developed a deep affection for, and he didn't say anything to, and he basically went around the city. He shut his house down. He wore black, and on the anniversary of the last day, he came out of the house wearing a white suit and got behind a horse and carriage, rode to the woman's house, and said, "The period is now over. I would love to begin to court you," and ended up finding the second great love of his life. And he said that he was guided by having to go through that period of saying goodbye to his wife, his first wife, who he adored, after she was gone. And there is a bit of wisdom in there that we move so fast nowadays. Yeah. We don't take the time to formalize it. And I remember my mom in that same story, Theresa, telling us all, she said, "Oh, the one thing I am going to do is this house is always going to be nice for the next 47 days." And she said, "That's not for God, that's for me." And that's an important thing to remember, that it's about a permission structure is what you're talking about, to say you should do this, and I've got a permission slip, so go away. I can wander the halls right now.
Yeah, and I think we have to sit in the grief. We have to let it inform us and shape us and do its work inside of us. But there is a time of walking out and saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready again and what I'd love to think about. I felt like, not at first, but I began to feel like James' death, the loss of that business I love so much, life was issuing me an invitation for the next, for whatever was next. And it was what I chose to do with it. And so I like to think that we go through sometimes these horrific endings, but nothing really stops there. Our lives don't stop there. The story of us isn't done with that ending. Every ending presents us with a beginning. And I think that's what you're talking about.
I love that. I also love the idea of not having to talk to people anymore, though. And I talk for a living, so that's a
I
tough
know
one.
you do.
Actually, since you laughed at that, I'll share with you. My girlfriend sent me a a meme yesterday that says, "I get irrationally upset when I go to the following places and there are people there: the gym, the grocery store, the park, the movies, work, outside, Earth." I love that.
Pretty much everything. Okay, I think, Lindsay, you need a vacation, and
I
it needs to
think
be a retreat of solitude and silence.
New
I think
Mexico.
so.
New Mexico calls. By the way, I had another friend of mine who said that his mantra was Dean Martin's when he would come on stage to do his show in Las Vegas. Who let all these people into my room?
Why are you people here?
What is going on here? What is going on?
Here's to solitude.
Here's to
quiet.
solitude. Here's to Theresa Bruno. You can check her out over at Soul Talks with Theresa. That's Theresa with an H. SoulTalksWithTheresa.com. I think this podcast, if you're listening, men and women, truckers, whoever you may be sitting at your desk, I think this is one that will give you real hope. And by the way, they're short episodes, so bless you for that as well. There she gets into it and gets out, as well as her book, He's Not Coming Back: Rewriting Life After Loss, A Path to Healing, something everybody can identify with. Theresa, thanks so much for making time with us. I would love to cross paths on both your podcast and mine, and we really appreciate you making time for our audience
Let's
today.
do it. You guys are doing great work in the world. Thank you.
You too, friend.
Guys, if you need a companion on the road, this is a podcast. If you're carrying grief, bring a friend along. Teresa's terrific. SoulTalksWithTheresa.com.